Extra, read more about it. Actually, let me do that for you. Hi, welcome into episode 231 of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. I'm your host, Ken Ray. Did you hear what Craig Federighi said? Did you hear why all the gas was gone in the southeast? We'll look into both of those stories and follow up on an app tracking transparency issue on this edition of The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. Well, here's the thing Mac users don't want to hear. Apple's Senior VP of Software Engineering, Craig Federighi, said yesterday that there is currently a level of malware on the Mac that Apple executives don't find acceptable. Really, though, he's the Senior VP of Software Engineering for Apple. You gotta figure that an acceptable amount of malware would be none, as far as he's concerned. But there's malware, and it's more than he and his are happy with. Now, I say this is something that Mac users don't want to hear, though if you're a regular listener to this show, you've heard it plenty. What you may not know or remember is that the history of viruses in Apple computers goes all the way back to the early 1980s. We talked about Elk Cloner and its ilk on checklist number 46, A Brief History of Malware. That whole episode's an interesting primer on malware in general, with attention paid to the Mac, of course. Checklist number 46, A Brief History of Malware. Skipping back to the present, a piece from CNET says Federighi made his malware comment during testimony at the ongoing Epic v. Apple trial. The more than acceptable amount of malware for the Mac was used as a defense against having to open the iPhone to third-party vendors. That's one of the things Epic would like to see Apple forced to do so they can stop paying commission to Apple for sales made through the App Store. Where iOS and iPadOS are concerned, CNET says Federighi described Apple's restrictive approach as an important part of protecting the more than 1 billion iPhones actively being used. It's an attractive target, he added, noting the cameras, microphones, location data, and two-step authentication technology that are standard on smartphones these days. All of these things make access or control of these devices potentially incredibly valuable to an attacker, according to Federighi. Now, while no system is 100% safe, Federighi and friends argue that the control Apple exerts on apps for iPad and iPhone keeps malware lower than it would otherwise be. Not that your Mac is a digital petri dish. I saw a headline somewhere that said something like, to defend iPhone, Apple throws Mac under the bus. Really, though, it's more like Apple has put flares and cones around something that's already in traffic. Again, Federighi's comment shouldn't be that surprising. Plenty of shows like this one, plenty of security professionals like the folks at SecureMac, and plenty of other security professionals have acknowledged the growth in malware targeting the Mac for years. CNET says the cybersecurity firm Malwarebytes wrote last year that the amount of malware being detected on Macs was outpacing PCs for the first time, though if I'm reading their report correctly, it was growth for Mac malware outpacing growth for PC malware, not greater instances of malware for the Mac. The other interesting thing about the 2020 Malwarebytes report, it said that of all the threats seen in 2020, only one incident involved anything other than tricking the user into downloading and opening something they shouldn't. No, it's not always something the user did, but a lot of times it is. That is why we spend so much time here hammering best practices like identifying and avoiding online scams. That's checklist number 6. Steering clear of phishing emails. That's checklist number 37. Best practices for login and password security. That's checklist number 8. The human element of hacking. That's checklist number 45. Seriously, we have been talking about this stuff for years. You can find all those shows and notes associated with them at SecureMac apple.com/checklist. So, to defend the iOS, iPadOS walled garden, Federighi was willing to be more open about malware and the Mac than he might normally be. It's not abandon all hope, ye who enter Big Sur. CNET summed up Federighi's explanation, saying, Apple identifies a couple of pieces of malware on its own or with the help of third parties each week and uses built-in systems to automatically remove them from customers' computers. But still, they can infect hundreds of thousands of computers before Apple stamps them out. Since last May, for example, Federighi said there have been 130 types of Mac malware, and just one of them infected 300,000 systems. Federighi said he believes Macs are still more secure than PCs, but he made clear that the Mac's facing a significantly larger malware problem than on its iPhones, iPads, and other devices. It is an endless game of whack-a-mole, according to the SVP. Here's what I heard about the Colonial Pipeline ransomware attack. Ransomware attack shuts down a top U.S. gasoline pipeline. That was a headline from NPR, indicating that ne'er-do-wells had hacked in and turned off the spigot. Sounding just as sinister, though, from the other end, was this headline from the transportation site Jalopnik. The Colonial Pipeline was fine, but its owner shut it down to make sure they'd get paid correctly. The truth, it seems, is somewhere between those two. Here's what it sounded like at the start, according to a piece from ABC News. A cybersecurity attack targeting operators of a major East Coast fuel pipeline has left the nation reeling, exposing the vulnerabilities of critical infrastructure to new threats, while also leaving many Americans with more questions than answers. Colonial Pipeline said on Saturday, the 8th of May, that it was the victim of a cyber attack involving ransomware and had proactively halted all pipeline operations as a result. Do we know who was behind this attack? Yes and no. An organization called DarkSide is known to have authored the malware used in the attack, but a piece from ZDNet says DarkSide is a ransomware as a service group that offers its own brand of malware to customers on a subscription basis. So DarkSide made the tool, though who wanted to use it may not be known. DarkSide is done, by the way. For now. A piece from Axios had the group saying last week that its funds had been drained and that access to its infrastructure had been terminated. So they're out. At least they say they are. That said, Axios pointed out that cybercriminal groups often disband and return under different names, and it therefore can't be determined if the disruption to DarkSide's infrastructure is legitimate or permanent. Now, there is so much more to this story, like the $4.4 million Colonial Pipeline paid to get access to the info locked by the ransomware. While some worry that that'll make miscreants more likely to try something like this again, the Colonial Pipeline CEO, Joseph Blount, told the Wall Street Journal that paying the ransom was the right thing to do for the country. Blount says he didn't make the decision lightly, and that he wasn't comfortable seeing money go out the door to people like this. Wait, why was this the right thing to do for the country? Well, probably because of all the panic buying in the Southeast. A CNBC piece from a little over a week ago covered that part, saying shortages of gasoline were most acute in North Carolina, where 65% of stations were out of fuel, according to data from GasBuddy. In South Carolina and Georgia, 43% of stations were dry. Across Virginia, 44% of stations were without fuel. That's what happens when you stop the flow, right? Well, sure, eventually. Really, though, that's what happens when people panic, which is what happened. Another piece from ABC News had Energy Secretary Jennifer Granholm saying last week, much as there was no cause for, say, hoarding toilet paper at the beginning of the pandemic, there should be no cause for hoarding gasoline, especially in light of the fact that the pipeline should be substantially operational by the end of this week and over the weekend. Which it was, because Colonial paid and regained access to locked systems. Systems that had nothing to do directly with pipeline operations themselves. Remember the part where the company proactively halted all pipeline operations as a result of the hack? DarkSide didn't turn off the gas. Colonial did. Now this is where words get dicey. On her zero-day Substack, cybersecurity and national security journalist Kim Zetter said Colonial Pipeline said the ransomware infected only its corporate IT network. That is definitely a way to read the statement. What Colonial said in a couple of statements was, quickly after learning of the attack, Colonial proactively took certain systems offline to contain the threat. These actions temporarily halted all pipeline operations and affected some of our IT systems, which we are actively in the process of restoring. They stepped through that like a barefoot child through nettles. That said, I've seen a few reports with reads similar to Zetter's. Going with that, is Jalopnik correct? Did pipeline owners really stop the flow of gas and cause a panic just to make sure they were paid correctly? Possible, though Zetter doesn't seem to think so. According to her post, Colonial's corporate IT network, the one that was locked by ransomware, and the process control network are connected and exchange information about how much fuel each supplier or distributor receives in order to bill them for it, says a source who works for a large midstream oil company that feeds fuel into Colonial's pipeline. While the connection between Colonial's corporate business network and the process control network is mostly in one direction, the source says, there's nothing that stops it from going bidirectional, meaning that depending on how secure the firewall that divides them is, a hacker can pass from the corporate network through the firewall and into the process network to impact systems there. Colonial is believed to use Cisco ASA firewalls, according to the piece, which have had serious vulnerabilities in the past. Once on the process control network, a hacker can install malware or manipulate data. If they were able to get in, let's say it's not run-of-the-mill ransomware but a smokescreen for further malicious activity, they could change data about the flow rates, they could modify the data, the source said. So it's possible that Jalopnik's cynical view is true, that Colonial wanted to make sure that it made its money. My read of Zetter's zero-day piece makes the Colonial statement seem plausible at the very least. The company proactively took certain systems offline to contain the threat. We'll follow up on an app tracking transparency story in a moment, but first a word about MacScan 3 from SecureMac. No less a source than Apple's Senior VP of Software Engineering Craig Federighi says the amount of malware on the Mac he does not find acceptable. Apple does what it can, but you can do something too. Protect your Mac with MacScan 3. MacScan 3 is a great defense against malicious software attacks aimed at your Mac. It's developed by SecureMac, trusted names in computer security and developers of exceptional security software for the Mac for over 20 years. MacScan 3 detects and removes Mac malware, catches keyloggers, removes tracking cookies, and provides full-range or targeted scanning, all without crowding up your hard drive or slowing down your machine. Sign up for a free 30-day trial today at securemac.com/MacScan. Then once you decide to buy for less. You can take a little off the cost of your subscription to MacScan 3 with offer code CHECKLIST. Try it first. Watch it kick those tracking cookies to the curb. Then when you're ready to buy for less with offer code CHECKLIST, at SecureMac.com/MacScan. We'll finish the day hitting a topic we've tackled off and on for months now. That topic is app tracking transparency. With the release of iOS 14.5, developers were required to ask a user's permission before tracking their activity from app to app to app. I'm not sure we all knew that that was a thing that was happening until Apple said at last year's WWDC that it was going to make apps ask rather than just letting them do that. And we've been talking about it ever since. 2 shows in particular. We talked about it a couple of months before it went live, checklist number 217, and we talked about it when it finally went live with the release of iOS 14.5 last month. That was on checklist number 228. Now, cool as it was that it was live, there was a problem for some. In settings on iOS 14.5, there's a toggle labeled Allow Apps to Request to Track. If it is set to the green or on position, apps can ask. If it is set to the gray or off position, not only can the apps not ask to track, they're basically told that the user said no. By default, iOS 14.5 sets that toggle to the off position. For reasons that escape me, some iOS 14.5 users wanted to turn that option on and found that they were unable to do so. Now, a piece from Mac Rumors says that's getting fixed, I guess. According to the report, Apple says there are a few circumstances where the setting may be legitimately grayed out, but a significant minority of users had still found that they were unable to adjust the setting despite meeting Apple's criteria for full access. Both Mac Rumors and a piece from iDownload blog have heard reports that folks affected can finally flip that switch on their own. Quoting iDownload blog, user reports on social media indicate that Apple has apparently managed to fix this bug remotely, because people who previously couldn't switch on the feature due to the grayed out settings toggle are now able to do so without having to install anything in particular. So if you were one of those affected, I don't know, maybe you want Facebook to track you. Hey, maybe you just want the satisfaction of telling them no every time they ask. Whatever the case, check your settings again. The choice may finally actually be yours. If you're looking for more security news and how-tos, the place to look is SecureMac.com/checklist. There you will find all of those shows I mentioned earlier. There will be notes there for every single one of those shows, and you can listen to all of them right there as well. It all starts in one place, SecureMac.com/checklist. If you like the checklist, could you do us a couple of favors? Leave us a review wherever you found the show, and please tell friends about the checklist. If you have a question you would like to ask or a topic you would like to hear us hit, our email address is checklist@securemac.com. That address again is checklist@securemac.com. And if you can't remember that, please do remember this. You're listening to The Checklist, brought to you by SecureMac. And we'll talk to you next week.